Hi guys, in this video we are going to start talking about rational functions and rational expressions. The irrational expression basically will have a fraction where you would have something that has x or a variable on the top and also on the bottom. So there are two expressions that are divided. So 4x minus 3, for example, is divided by 2x plus 5, and so on. So those are rational expressions. So the first thing you need to know is that any fraction is not defined when the bottom is 0. So whenever you have a fraction, a divided by b, you need to understand that the bottom cannot be 0. So division by 0 is not allowed. The reason why that's the case is because if we could assume that yes, we can divide by 0, then let's say you have a 3 and then you divide it by 0, you're saying, well, that's got to be something. So whatever that something is, I don't even know what that is, right? But some number. If that were the case, then you could then, by the definition of division, you would multiply both sides by 0, right? So you can then multiply by 0. Then here, I guess it'll cancel, right? And then you will wind up with 3 equals some number times 0, but some number times 0 is 0. And then you get 3 is not 0. So you cannot have something like that. So you need to understand that anytime you have a fraction, division by 0, the bottom equals 0 is not allowed. That's a problem, okay? So in these questions, you're going to be asked, what are the values of x? What are the values of x for which these expressions, such as in example 1, example 2, undefined? So for which these expressions are undefined. So basically, all you need to know is when is the bottom equal 0. So this fancy word is when is it undefined. What that means is which x value, if I stick it in there, the calculator, let's say, is going to spit out an error or there will be a problem. So the only thing in these questions that you should worry about is the bottom. You can safely ignore the top. It doesn't really matter what it is. What matters is when is the bottom 0. Whenever it is 0, that's when the whole thing is undefined. So what you're gonna need to do if you're solving something like this is you're gonna take your bottom, you're gonna set it equal 0, and you're gonna solve this for x. So in this case, this would be if I subtract 5 from both sides, I will wind up with equal 2x equal to negative 5, right? And so from here, if 2x equals negative 5, if I divide both sides by 2, I would get x equals negative 5 divided by 2. And that's the value when the expression is not defined. So let me also show you on a calculator what would happen. So imagine that I went to a table, right? And I put this expression that I have. Now, when you're inserting a rational expression, always surrounded by parentheses, both the top and the bottom. It is very important when you do this on the calculator. Otherwise, your answer will be not correct. So let's say I put something like this. Now, I'm going to change this to ask. And I'll show you that in a second. So I am using a downward arrow to go from out, but then I'm using the right arrow to change it to ask. So now ask is blinking and I can press enter. Now go again and press OK. So the reason why I did that is because I want to test out my answer. I think it's negative 5 over 2, but I don't know. So how do I check that? Well, I enter x equals negative 5 divided by 2. So I'm pressing enter and the calculator tells me it's an error. So if it were an integer, you would probably see it in the table. But because it's not an integer, it's like a fraction, negative 2.5, you're not going to see it in the table because the table goes by ones. But if you just enter the value that you think is wrong, like where the function gives you an undefined, the calculator is going to show you that. So you know that this is correct answer. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if I can separate these examples so they look like I didn't leave myself enough space. So let's take a look at the second example. So second example, again, when is this undefined? Again, all you worry about is can the bottom be 0? And if it is, that's not good. Like that means it's going to be undefined. So I'm going to take x squared plus 5x plus 6. and I set it equals 0, and I'm going to solve this by using the zero factor property. So first I have to factor, and then I'm going to go ahead and make each of the factors equal 0, and I'll solve for x. So factoring this is pretty easy by trial and error. So I'm thinking of two numbers that would multiply to 6 and add to 5, and pretty easy to see that that would be 2 and 3. So that's equal to 0, and that separates into two equations. Either the first one is 0 or the second one is 0. Now solving those for x by subtracting -2 from the first one and -3 from the second one will give you negative 2 and -3, right? What I said, by subtracting 2 from the first one, both sides, and subtracting 3 from the second one, both sides. Okay, so now I have -2, -3. So I know that those are the values when the bottom will become 0, the whole thing is going to be undefined. So to check that, let's go to table. I'm going to clear what I have, and I'm going to enter the new expression. Again, the top doesn't matter. You can actually enter whatever you want. You don't even have to enter x plus 4. You can like put 1. It doesn't really matter. The bottom is what matters. So it's x squared plus 5x plus 6. And so at this point, I will actually, because my numbers are integers, -2, -3, I can go back and change this to outer, okay? Because I don't need to necessarily enter them. I can just scan through the table. So if I go down, I can see that at -3 and at -2, both, the calculator is telling me that that's an error. And the reason why is because you have division by 0, and you can't divide by 0. That's why the calculator is like, excuse me, what is that? I don't know what to do with that, right? So you know that -2 and -3 are correct answers.